From Renato Sobral admitting that he held the choke knowing the fight had ended, to Sokoudjou's desperate actions against Jan Nordicke after the bell, here are some of the fighters who didn't listen to the bell and kept hitting their opponents. First up, Sobral's fight against David Heath at UFC 74. Renato Babaloo Sobral was one of the perennial top athletes in the light heavyweight division, and his bout against David Heath was considered one of the most exciting matchups on the UFC 74 card. But things got fairly ugly fairly quickly in the second round, when Sobral had already stained the floor with Heath's blood. He had him where he wanted, and he kept landing punches, blow after blow, flush to the face. It's Fight Ethics 101 to stop as soon as the referee asks you to. But Sobral apparently didn't care about those instructions and kept pounding Heath. He even targeted his eye on a couple of occasions after the fight had ended. Now, the thing is, this one makes the list purely because of Sobral's intentions, and they were pure evil. The now retired Brazilian was asked about his decision to keep hitting Heath after the fight had ended, and in the press conference, he revealed that he knew the fight had ended, but he still didn't want to stop. He said it was because of an unspeakable name that Heath had called him and wanted to teach him a lesson. The thing is, even the crowd, once pro-Sobral, booed him, further indicating that everyone knew the fight had ended. Ultimately, his decision to keep going changed everything for Babaloo. He was kicked out of the UFC and the Nevada State Athletic Commission permanently, and even his $25,000 winning bonus was withheld. Just like that, Babaloo's career at the top was over. But some fighters get away with their excuses to keep hitting after the bell, like Jorge Masvidal against Ben Askren. In fact, this fight has gone down in UFC history for many reasons. Not only did Masvidal land the fastest knockout in the history of the sport, the entire fight was over within 5 seconds. Askren was backed to achieve great things after inking his deal with the UFC. He'd already won his first fight via bulldog choke after a controversial stoppage, but little did he know that his next one would produce even more controversy. Masvidal, a longtime veteran, was understandably the favorite, but Askren's heavy trash talk before the fight didn't help his case. Within 5 seconds into the first round, Askren got knocked out by a flying knee. His undefeated run had ended, but not before Masvidal landed a couple of blows directly into his face. He even wanted to land a third to his defenseless face, but was thankfully pulled away by the referee. Not to mention the brutal fashion with which Jorge mocked him while the unconscious wrestler awaited medical assessment, from taunting him to even doing an impression of Askren pretending to be knocked out himself. It was absolute chaos. But that's the nature of combat sports. Your world can turn upside down within seconds. However, it seems that it's not just UFC where fighters leave one after the bell. Even boxing has seen its fair share of illegal blows, like the fight between Krzysztof Kowalski and Maurice Briedis. As important as it is to check if the boxers are following protocol, it's also crucial to have an age limit on referees overseeing a fight. A more capable referee wouldn't have let things get ugly the way they did between Kowalski and Briedis. In the second round, Kowalski fouled his opponent, hitting him behind the head. As per the rules, Briedis should have allowed the ref to deal with it, but he didn't, and instead elbowed Kowalski in the face, who fell to the canvas. Somehow, the ref missed what had happened and chose to ignore it. Yet, that wouldn't be the worst thing he did. After the fight resumed, Briedis caught Kowalski twice in the face and ended up dropping him twice. That was enough for everyone to see that the fight was completely over and that the Latvian had won. In fact, as the bell goes, you can hear everyone asking for the fight to stop, even the commentators asking for it to end. But the referee somehow is in another world completely and doesn't hear it, causing Briedis to give Kowalski an illegal beating. And the worst part was the Latvian champion admitting after the fight that he heard the bell, but decided not to stop. At least the UFC has a better way of dealing with such incidents, because what happened between Paul Semtex Daly and Josh Koscheck was inexcusable. It's crazy how a moment of rage can lead to a fighter throwing away his entire career. That's exactly what Paul Daly did back in 2010 in Montreal at UFC 113. His fight against Josh Koscheck didn't go the way he'd planned, and that's understandable. Everyone gets frustrated, but to do what he did, well, at least he's been banned from the promotion, and it was the the right call by Dana White. So after losing the welterweight bout, Daly actually chased after Koscheck, who had his back turned to the Brit and landed a sucker punch, causing a lot of controversy in the MMA universe. Things got so bad that Dana told media outlets that he doesn't care if Semtex becomes the best fighter ever. He won't be allowed back in the promotion after what he'd done. The worst part is that even Daly realizes his mistake and admits that he regrets it to this day. Rousimar Palhares, though, was stubborn as a mule. See, Palhares got away many times, unlike Daly. And sure, his situation was somewhat different to the British MMA, as he had his leg lock antics, where he would keep the leg lock on long after the bell had gone. It's not similar to throwing a sucker punch after the fight, but in many ways, it's actually worse, because it became a habit for the Brazilian. After getting suspended for doing it against Tomas Derval, Palhares kept on making excuses like he was in the zone, etc., but that doesn't mean you're allowed to do that. It wasn't until his fight against Jake Shields that the authorities decided that enough was enough. To be fair, it really got ugly. Not only did he gouge the challenger's eyes, but he also held onto a Kimura long after the tap. The UFC had released him prior to this incident, but then the WSOF president, Ray Sefo, took similar action, stripping him of his belt and suspending him indefinitely. Good riddance. There's no place for such fighters in the sport. If you can't control your emotions, you're better off staying away altogether, which is why I appreciate the authorities for taking action in the next fight too, the one between Jose Uzcategui and Andre Dirrell. Now, while most of these punches or blows on the list are intentional, some aren't so. This one doesn't look intentional, even though it was a knockout punch right after the bell had sounded. But in Uzcategui's defense, he was in the middle of a combination when the bell rang, and it's probably impossible to pull out at that minute. Unfortunately for Dirrell, he caught those in the face, getting knocked out right after the bell. But that wasn't the end of it. Things got much uglier after the fight. Dirrell had been declared the victor as the referee deemed the punch to be after the bell. It was the right decision, and everyone seemed to agree with it. Both the fighters were in their corners getting medical attention. Andre Dirrell's uncle, Leon Lawson Jr., decided to take matters into his own hands. He wasn't happy with the win alone, and believed that Uzcategui had landed those punches intentionally. So he made his way to the other corner and assaulted the boxer, whose hands were on the rope. As a result, thankfully, Lawson was banned from the sport permanently. Talking about unintentional blows, though, you can't forget the Steven Luovano fight against Bernabe Concepcion. Just to add a bit of backstory, Luovano held the WBO world title, and he came up against Bernabe Concepcion, the challenger for his crown. For 7 rounds, the fight was as close as it could be, with narrow scores in favor of either fighter. But with the end of round 7 approaching, Concepcion hit the champion with an insane shot, but unfortunately, it landed right after the bell. The referee awarded the win to the title holder because it was deemed an illegal blow, and just like that, Concepcion's charge for the title ended. That said, it's the intentional hits that cause the most controversy, like the Sokoudjou no contest against Jan Nordicke. This is probably the most controversial decision in Dream9's history. The promotion saw Sokoudjou take on Jan Nordicke, and after a one-sided fight, Sokoudjou managed to get on top of Nordicke. He landed the winning blows, but he then decided to keep hitting the South African well after the referee attempted to stop the contest. Sure, he was desperate to get a win under his belt after a dry spell, but the African assassin was well out of line to hit an opponent after the fight had ended. He was literally seen grounding and pounding Jan again and again. After the fight, Sokoudjou acknowledged that it was stupid of him to do it, further adding that there was no bad blood that would motivate him to do what he did. So, from Sokoudjou's ground and pound after the whistle to Sobral's admission that he held on to the choke knowing the fight had ended, here were the fighters who didn't listen to the bell.